All right. Take two or five at this point. I don't know. Considering Apple and the digital divide, it is Wednesday, the 10th of February, 2021, and this is macOS Ken really seriously live. What kind of day have I had? Hi, everybody. It's Ken. Ray may be welcoming you into an edition of macOS Ken Live, this thing that happens, by the seat of our pants sometimes, Monday through Friday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places. Often born of topics discussed on macOS Ken, and sometimes growing like a weed from topics discussed on macOS Ken. No second part of the show today. This whole thing is just kind of stream of consciousness. I was telling people in the chat room on YouTube earlier that I'm like between topics right now, which may sound kind of strange, but we have talked the car thing to death. And of course, we're going to have to keep talking about the car thing, but I just couldn't really, put myself in that again today. A lot of tomorrow's news is just kind of like news. It's just straight up news. There's nothing like, oh, think about this, or oh, isn't that interesting? I will fully confess, I'm also sort of caught on a couple of other shows that I'm producing right now. And so I had thought that I was going to come here and say, I got nothing. Have a good day. We'll talk tomorrow. And then I was talking with my special lady friend, just sort of about news of the day stuff and really kicking things around. And the one thing that we hit on that was kind of interesting to me is the fact, and stick with me because this goes a few different directions. The fact that when CBS All Access becomes Paramount Plus next month, it's going to leave the third generation and, of course, the second generation Apple TV behind. And her take was, it's kind of a bummer that Apple is leaving those people behind. And I said, Apple's got nothing to do with it. It's CBS All Access that's doing that. It's YouTube that's doing that, because that's happening with YouTube as well. You can kind of understand it for CBS All Access because they're writing a whole new app. They're writing a whole new app for Paramount Plus. There's no reason they couldn't go ahead and put that content back in the old CBS app, except, of course, they don't have a unified presentation at that point. Plus, it's just more work, and they're creating something entirely new. So to create something entirely new and say, right, we're good, we're moving on now, you can kind of understand. YouTube is a little bit less easy to understand because right now, if you have a third generation Apple TV Plus, if you have a third generation Apple TV, YouTube works. And there's going to be a day in March where all of a sudden that's not going to work anymore. It's just going to stop. For a device that's 8 years old, that's where you sort of get the whole, like, yes, on the one hand, you might be talking about a digital divide thing, but probably people who are seriously caught on the other side of the digital divide didn't have an Apple TV 8 years ago, or 7 years ago, or 6 years ago. Doesn't really feel like a digital divide thing. Now, if this had happened in April of last year, in fact, I think in April of last year, there was somebody, I can't remember who, but there was a service provider that stopped supporting the third generation Apple TV. And I was livid this time last year when they did, not this time last year, in April of last year when they did that. Because in April of last year, we didn't know what the world was going to look like. We were just entering hashtag these uncertain times. I think we have to start calling that hashtag times like these, because they're no longer uncertain. I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty, but the certainty that we have is the uncertainty. So I don't think we can call them hashtag these uncertain times anymore. We know how things are going to go. We don't know how they're going to go, but we know how they're going, which I know doesn't quite make sense. In April and May of last year, when people started announcing changes that were going to negatively affect people who were already being negatively affected by everything else out there, I personally thought they should slam the brakes because, look, things are going to be back to normal in a couple of months. We thought, or I thought. And so, anybody who was pulling something like that in April of last year, I thought they were kind of heartless. And now they got to get back to business as usual in hashtag these unusual times, I suppose. The whole thing did get me wondering, though, about Apple and the digital divide. And is Apple responsible at all for that? You've got things that Apple is doing, like, they've got the racial equality and justice initiative, where, of course, they're building that campus down by the historically black colleges and universities in Atlanta. They're putting in the first developer academy in Detroit. They are certainly working on bringing the coding curriculum of theirs to as many schools as they possibly can, both community colleges, high schools, universities, you name it. They're doing what they can to get the kind of education and opportunities out to people. But what about putting the things in people's hands? Now, there are a few different things you can talk about there. There's iPhone SE, which is not a budget phone. It's a budget iPhone. I don't remember how much it costs. Is it 400, 300? If it's 300, you're getting close to not a budget phone, but you're certainly getting near what people will pay or can pay, like across the socioeconomic spectrum for a smartphone. I can't remember exactly how much it is, though. If it's $400, it's a little pricey, but it's still, kind of within reach for some people. You've also got the used market, the secondhand market, which kind of sounds like a crap thing to think about, but a 6-year-old iPhone is still a good iPhone. An 8-year-old Mac is still a good Mac. 5 to 7 year iPad is an okay iPad, although there's a possibility it's aging out as far as whether it can handle iPad OS. This is going to sound gross. Does Apple's aspirational stuff end up leading to a bunch of knock-on stuff that ends up being good for people who might be caught on the other side of the digital divide? Thinking about things like $99 tablets. The idea of a $99 tablet years ago would have been insane. But there are companies out there that have figured out, that they can make a margin like that big, or maybe they're thinking they can sell services or something along those lines. The problem with those is, if they're only making $99, chances are whatever money they're making isn't going into security. Chances are whatever money they're making isn't going into, protecting people's privacy. And then you create a whole other kind of digital divide, it seems to me, one where people are educated or even being protected in any way as far as their privacy or security are concerned. Is that Apple's job? Apple's doing a good job of educating people, but the problem is that if the education that you give to people is what you really need is an Apple device and it costs $700 and you can only afford 4 or you can only afford 2, most people aren't even concerned, honestly, about privacy and security anyway. Apple is very concerned about privacy and security, and that's great. Most people, I think, just, want a thing that works, want a thing that does its thing. And again, I'm partly caught on the privacy and security thing because of the work I'm doing for the checklist for tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know what Apple's responsibility is. I know what Apple says its responsibility is to consumers. I know that Apple wants everybody to be its consumers. I know that Apple prices itself out of being able to, give its stuff to everybody or sell its stuff to everybody. Now, Apple's having a hard time keeping up with demand, still selling to the higher end, right? I don't know what would happen if Apple was like, you know what? $200 iPhones for everybody. I'm not talking about subsidies. I'm saying $200 iPhones for everybody because we can afford to do that now. I talked on today's macOS Ken about, and it was just an offhanded comment. Remember when most financial analysts wanted Apple to come out with a truly cheap, by cheap I mean inexpensive iPhone. They wanted them to go for market share rather than going for margins, which is funny because if Apple had done that, then Wall Street would have stood around saying, man alive, these margins, how are they making any money? Answer is volume and services, maybe one day. But I mean, it's you had people standing there saying these need to be cheaper so everybody can have them. But then, people worry when Apple's margin goes from 38 to 36 and a half. At the same time, Apple could afford to get truly cheap now. Apple could afford to tackle that digital divide now. Is that Apple's job? Or will they at some point? I don't know. The other thing I found myself wondering, honestly, is do you need Apple as an aspirational device maker out there so that other people make less expensive devices that are more accessible to everyone, which is a really just a horrible, horrible way to think about it. I don't know. These were things that I was thinking about, and there are things that I would love to hear, your thoughts on as well. I know this is an incredibly short show, but there are many, many reasons for that. Yeah, partly the technical difficulty that we had going into it, and you people listening to the audio thing, boy, did you miss a lot of fun. There's also just it's not a fully formed idea, but it's some stuff that I'm thinking about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it as well. I think I said at the top of the show, this is going to be the start of another conversation. If I didn't say that, let me say now, this is going to be a start of another conversation. I would love to hear your thoughts on the digital divide. Specifically, I would love to hear whether you think Apple is doing enough, whether you think it's Apple's responsibility, whether Apple has to do anything as far as that concerned, or is that, is that for government? Is that for school? Is that for the markets? It's not a fully formed thought in my head, as I say, but I would love I'd love to get some feedback from you. You can leave a comment. No, you can't. I was going to say you can leave a comment on this video, but this video doesn't exist. You can email me though. info@macoscan.com is the way to do that. INFO, info@macoscan.com. Holy cow, so many shows tomorrow. There is the checklist. There is, in a few minutes, Shelley Brisbane coming by. She and I are actually going to talk price. She and I are going to talk price on Apple stuff. And I'm going to realize halfway through that conversation how silly I'm being about affordability where these things are concerned. We got macOS Can tomorrow morning as well. And of course, if the tech gods smile upon us, we'll actually do a real macOS Can live tomorrow afternoon. And I will talk to you soon. Should I yell? Could you hear me? Apple likes to maintain a 30% margin, says Vern. Vern's not wrong about that. I'm going all the way back up here. I don't even need that because you guys are right there. Well, you're really late, Bill. All right. Vern was not late because I was. Oh, really late because I said 2019. Yeah, this video goes away as soon as we're done. Redneck Tech says, what about SpaceX and their new internet? They are changing the world as we know it. I'm not overly familiar. I know they have, 100,000 users, but I haven't actually looked into it at all. I'm never really interested in anything that's satellite based though, because that's all download, not upload. And so much of what I do is upload. Like there was, I can't remember who. There was some service that I looked at one point and their download speeds were amazing. And then their upload speeds were dial up, like literally dial up back when there was that. In fact, it might have been a satellite service. I'm not sure. Webb went to Columbus, Ohio today. Now I've got that Pretender song in my head. Well, Webb, that Back to Ohio song. What about Apple and crypto, says Frank. I couldn't get my head around. It's interesting. I wondered about that guy. Frank's talking about the new guy from RBC who said that what Apple ought to do is open up Apple Wallet for cryptocurrency exchange. I didn't quite get what he was saying, except that he did talk about, who is it? Square. I think Square actually does cryptocurrency exchange. And he talked about the amount of money they make. He talked about how small Square's install base is versus Apple's. So if Apple got into it with the 1.5 billion, with the 1.5 billion devices out there, then Apple would probably get 200 million people in, and that would be $40 billion a year. Is that just based on the transaction? Is that just based on the transaction fees, basically? The whole thing struck me as crazy. It really seemed like somebody coming out saying, hey, I've got an idea and notice me. Because I don't think there's any indication that that is a thing that Apple is thinking of doing. But, all right, cool. We all know his name now, Mitch Steves. I knew a guy once named Steel Colony. That was his real name. Hard to imagine that was his real name, but that was actually the name he went by. That's better than Mitch Steves. Vern says, here's a topic. Yeah, I saw that story, but I haven't had a chance to get into it yet. North Dakota Senate debates breaking Apple's App Store monopoly. A couple of articles that I read said it's not likely to pass the way it is right now. It is kind of a, I don't want to say scary thing, but it is kind of a scary thing to think of how many different things could just fundamentally change the way Apple does business. That said, they could leave North Dakota and probably not lose any sleep. And I mean no offense. I mean, when California or New York or Florida or Texas or Washington State, maybe, when a state that size is, in terms of population, starts doing stuff, I think they all have to start paying attention. If North Dakota decides North Dakota wants to cause trouble for Apple, I don't even think there's an Apple store in North Dakota. I don't think they would, I think they'd be fine. You could open a Apple store, though, on the North Dakota-South Dakota border, and people could just drive there and pick up their stuff. I'm thinking about tattoos and fireworks, actually. Oh, Perry Mason. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the new Perry Mason on HBO. Eugene says there's going to be a new app. I'm going to lose my progress in Perry Mason watching. Hopefully you won't, but you might. I don't know. Hopefully they will have thought of that. Otherwise, you could just, pick back up. Like when they took The West Wing off of Netflix and put it on the HBO Max. I just had to remember where I was. It was fine. If we change hashtag these uncertain times to hashtag these unusual times, we're going to have to change the macOS Ken drinking game rules. I don't know, man. Are the times really uncertain anymore? I mean, seriously, it was gallows humor to talk about that. So I'm in Southern California. I don't I didn't, because nobody does anymore. I did not get a Disney pass every year, but I've been here long enough now that I've got a Disney pass one year, then I took a year off, and then I got a Disney pass again. And right before I came to do the show, I got a letter from them, telling me that my Disney pass is really no good, and they're going to be returning my money because they have no idea when it's going to be good. So I'm going to get a prorated amount back. But they're still trying to get me to go to the downtown Disney district where they have shops to buy stuff. In fact, they've got 30% off right now. And there's so much of me that wants to do it, and I'm not going to because, people getting sick. was having an exchange with a friend of mine, a listener to this show, somebody who's been listening to Mac OS Ken, maybe even before it was Mac OS Ken, maybe when I was still doing Inside Mac. And he complimented me on the show, the shows that I'm doing now, and asked me how I was doing. And I told him, and I wrote back, and I was like, "How are you?" And he wrote back and said, "Oh, well, the wife and I had COVID over Christmas." There are pockets of uncertainty, but I don't know if we can call them uncertain times anymore. Certainly strange. That's interesting. Matthew says maybe Apple can start the rent leasing program for the public by doing it with the colleges and the HBCUs and others, thereby taking one more hurdle to learning out of the way. That's cool. I would hope, actually, if you're, well, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting idea. Frank says nobody uses even half the power of their devices, so refurbs make perfect sense. Refurbs do make perfect sense. I'm a huge fan of them. They don't make them easy to find, I think, because what Apple would rather you did was buy stuff. New stuff, I mean. I'm going to pass on that one, Paul. Privacy and security are nebulous ideas. It's like, and anyway, I get what you're saying, but I don't quite get what you're saying, but cool. Oop, things jumped. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Matthew. Sorry, back there, Matthew was saying they could probably afford to do what you're saying if they screw the third-party vendors who make the accessories for iPhones and Macs, changing them to consignment sales, but that's just a rumor you said the other day. I think it was the Telegraph out of the UK had talked to some third-party vendors. I don't remember whether I said that that one was a rumor or not. I mean, obviously, I haven't heard it. It's not the kind of thing Apple's going to report, but it is the kind of thing that the Telegraph heard from a few people on. So I don't know how to address what you're saying there. I apologize. Regnet Tech says not only does Apple not have to make cheaper stuff, he doesn't think they ever will. See, that's part of the interesting thing, and you'll hear it on well, we talked about it here actually the other day. One of the things that's been most surprising that Apple has done is how they've actually made certain pricing things more palatable, and prices have come down on some stuff. I mean, you can get into a Mac now if you're willing to go for a MacBook Air for just under $1,000. And when I started Mac OS Ken in 2006, I don't think there was a Mac that was even close to $1,000, was there? It was a big deal when they got down to like 1,200, I want to say, for a MacBook Pro anyway. And now I don't remember when the Mac Mini came out. I know that's not been $1,000 machine, although you can jack the price up depending on how much customization you do. And still, $1,000 is a lot of money, especially when you can get 4 Chromebooks for the same price. That's what I was going for, Chuck. Chuck says you need Apple out there as an innovator in the field so that others can copy from them. It's not great, but it's true. I mean, well, it's not need is the only thing I would question in there, but I mean, that certainly does end up being a thing that Apple functions as. Well, they're still buying the well, yeah, okay. Vern says they'll eventually, after paying down the R&D costs, have the ability to push Mac prices down since they're not buying processors. They're not licensing the technology, although they're still licensing the ARM technology to do that. But right, they're not paying the Intel price. Just because they can, I don't know if they will. Although, who was it? It was somebody who listens to Mac OS Ken Live. I don't know if they're here today. Somebody really liked the idea of a MacBook SE at some point, in the same way they have, like, the iPhone SE and Apple Watch SE at this point. Take, the components from 2 or 3 years ago, take the best from 2 or 3 years ago, put that into a more than serviceable machine, knock the price way the heck down, maybe not to the lowest Chromebook, but, knock it down below a high-end Chromebook, and then you've got the Mac as an interesting thing again. What changes all that, it seems to me, is this past year. You don't have to make Macs inexpensive to get lots of people to buy them. They made more on the Mac last quarter than they've ever made on the Mac because of hashtag these unusual times. Continuing with this point from earlier, Redneck Tech says quality over quantity, I believe, is always a better way of doing things, and I think Apple is the same and always will be. Have they not made enough money at this point, though? And I know it's not a, the race is over thing, but have they not made enough money at this point that they could actually conceivably lower the cost enough that they sell it to everybody without losing quality? I mean, what they lose is that air of erudition, maybe. What they lose is the snobbery factor of everybody can have it, but almost everybody has it now anyway. I would have said goodbye to Bill, but he was already gone. Might have been HughesNet. I don't think it was HughesNet, Roger, but it was something like that. Was it? Well, I could keep guessing, but oh, I remember. I think it was DirecTV, or it was maybe DirecTV, and it also had internet, or it was one of the satellite providers, because I really thought about it because they had a really good deal on content and there was a ton of it. And they said they had the internet access as well, but then seriously, it was dial-up for upload. Because, most people don't create, I guess. Okay, Redneck Tech says that the thing that SpaceX is doing, their satellite service, is quite good, both download and upload with low latency. All right, cool. Cool. Done some YouTube. Okay, sometimes get audio glitches. Yeah, sometimes I do too. You guys are talking about the crypto thing. We have not gotten to the bottom of the conversation, but I'm sorry about all the technical problems today, but I've actually got a motor because I've got another recording in 12 minutes. And I'm not going to turn this around yet because I'm not sure it was a show. You guys were listening. Was that a show? I mean, seriously, I'm not asking you to, never mind. I shouldn't have asked that question. Never mind. Forget I asked it. I'm going to go listen to it and decide whether I'm going to put it in the feed. That's what I'll say. And I am going to kill this video. All right. Thanks, Web. Okay, stop. Who you calling kiddo? Lord, I was born a rambling Ken, Frank. Well, I didn't start rambling really until I was about 1.5 years, I think. All right. You people are wonderful. I'm sorry about all the trouble. Thank you for sticking around. Every one of you rock. Take care.